welcome to NCARB Live. Today we're going to talk about architecture career tips. I'm Jenny Koecki, and I'm joined today by two experts in professional development. Amber Hamilton, the Director of Human Resources at Perkins & Will's Atlanta studio, and Jeremy Fretz, the Assistant Vice President of Experience and Education here at NCARB. Thank you both for joining us today. So whether you're a student looking for your first internship or you're well into the licensure process, we're here to answer your questions about a career in architecture. So you can submit your questions at any time using the chat tool on your screen. And if you have to stop watching, you can always watch a recording later on our blog or YouTube channel. So before we get started, can you both tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do? Amber, why don't you start?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amber Hamilton, and I'm the Director of Human Resources for Perkins & Will's Atlanta and Miami studios. I'm also an Associate Principal at the firm. And I started at Perkins & Will in 2003 and have about 20 years of experience within the HR field and about 15 of those within the AEC industry. My role at Perkins & Will really is to work with our leadership teams to set the HR strategy for my studios. And also, in particular for you all, I do a lot with onboarding, recruiting, talent development, and learning and development for our staff. So I'm really happy to be here, so thank you all for having me.
Great. Jeremy?
I'm Jeremy Fretz. I am the Assistant Vice President for Experience and Education here at NCARB, and I'm an architect as well. Our Experience and Education group works with the Architectural Experience Program. We work with continuing education, and we collaborate with universities and even with high schools on promoting the career of architecture and just filling in the blanks in what you need to become a competent architect and to remain one. I also, as I said, have come from practice. I worked for 22 years. I'm licensed in Virginia and Indiana, and have practiced and worked across 13 different states. And last but not least, I thought that there was room for improvement in architecture, that it would be a lot of fun to help architects get better at what they do. And so I pursued a graduate degree in human resource development, and am now here getting to do just that and help you and help the profession at large improve.
Well, great. We're so glad you're both here to share your expertise. So as we wait for some questions to roll in from the audience, Amber, can you tell us about some of the qualities you look for in candidates at your firm?
Great, of course. So at Perkins & Will, we look for people who are well-rounded. We look for people who are creative and can kind of think outside the box. We look for people who can clearly explain their process when they're talking through solving a design solution. Especially if you're an entry-level candidate, we're not really looking for someone who comes to the table with a lot of experience, although internships are a great resume builder. But we do look for people who really are creative. And when we're interviewing people, we're always thinking about how you're going to fit into our culture, how you're going to fit and interact with our teams, and how you might react in front of a client. So keep all those things in mind when you're coming through the interviews. And we also talked a little bit earlier just about the interviewing process. And when you're interviewing with someone, it really is an opportunity for you to interview the firm as well as for them to interview you. So come prepared with questions, thoughtful questions that shows that you've done your research.
Great. And Jeremy, what are some questions you think licensure candidates can ask as they look for firms that will help support them in the process of becoming an architect?
Sure. One real easy one is to ask something like, now, who will be my AXP supervisor when I'm working here? Or, how, do you have any other people who are currently, in the AXP program who are taking tests? You can ask sort of about what the culture is at the office at the time, and I think that's a nice, gentle way to tease out those facts that you're looking for about the support that you'd get. And I will emphasize on what you said a moment ago about the sort of two-way dynamic of the interview process. I heard that from a lot of other hiring professionals as well, that really shows that you've done your homework, that you know something about the firm, that you know something about what you want to be doing, and it's really helpful.
Great. Thanks. Sorry. Okay. So we're going to start taking questions from our audience now. And remember, you can submit your questions at any time using the chat tool. So our first question comes from Nathaniel. Would firms be more likely to hire someone if they have started their exams already?
So I'll take that. So that's not necessarily a determining factor whether or not we would hire someone. Of course, every firm and every major firm you're talking to really does want you to become a licensed architect because that's important for the firm and important for you. So I do think it's important. What we found over the course of my 15 years at Perkins & Will, the sooner you get to that process, the better, before life gets in the way. But it's always a good idea to get started as early as you can after you've completed those AXP hours. But it's not necessarily a determining factor as to whether or not we'll hire you. As long as you have the intent on taking those exams, that's a good thing.
And I think there is a converse to that, though. If you have been working for a long time and you haven't started taking the exams, that starts to raise questions, right?
Yes.
You know, why, and it might come up in your interview. You know, now you've worked somewhere for 10 years. Why haven't you? Have you started your AXP? Have you started taking an exam yet? That will raise questions.
Great. Our next question is from Kelsey. She says, I'm a few years out of school, but the mentorship at my current job isn't great. Do you have any suggestions on how to start those conversations?
So I would think that if your mentorship is not currently great at your firm, if you could talk with, it's always in your best interest to tell people what your goals and aspirations are. It's always great to speak up about your own career and career path and what you want to get out of a particular position. So I do think it's worth it for you to make it known to HR, make it known to operations, make it known to that mentor that you have, what your goals are. I think people kind of need to take a hold of their career and make sure that they're actually articulating what their aspirations are.
I want to clarify a couple of terms, though, because sometimes they get used interchangeably, and sometimes it does matter. If you are, for your AXP program, you have what's called a supervisor, and that's the person who's observing you work. That you don't have a lot of choice in who that is. But in terms of an actual mentor, you can choose someone else. It can be someone in your firm. It can be someone in another firm. That you can find. If your supervisor isn't providing you with the kind of support that you want, or if you feel like you just don't connect with them, you can also go out and find somebody else to be your mentor and to guide you in that through your career process. And we encourage you to do that.
All right. So next question is from Tara, and I think this one is probably a Jeremy question. How do you define lawful architecture practice? And I think that's referring to the experience settings under the AXP.
I'm glad somebody else asked me that question last week because I know the answer. I'm new here, so 7 months in. Some of these questions could be tricky, but the answer is actually defined at a state level. So you actually have to find out how the lawful practice of architecture is defined in your state or U.S. jurisdiction, and that might vary slightly. So it's really a state-by-state question.
Okay. And our next question is from Audrey. She says, with more than 6 years of experience, do I still need a portfolio to apply to a new job as a project manager? And a follow-up, how do you suggest displaying professional work in a portfolio?
That's a really good question. And I'll answer it by saying I think you always should have a portfolio of your work, whether you're applying for a position as a project manager or a project designer. What we ask for at Perkins & Will is also to see your schoolwork. Even though you're 6 years in, it's helpful for us to see your school portfolio because when you're in school, it allows you a little bit more opportunity to be creative in a way that you may not be with clients and budgets as you're 6 years into your career. So I do think a portfolio is a great idea. Your portfolio is really a representation of you in terms of what you're actually displaying to the potential employer. And your portfolio really should have process. So we want to understand your process and how you come to a design solution. So that's what we do that's the questions that we're asking. And your process really should speak for itself. So an employer should be able to tell what your process is without you having to explain it, but you should always be able to explain your process well in the interviewing process.
Jenny, am I allowed to ask follow-up questions?
Sure.
Amber, when I was in school, my portfolio was this document we spent a semester preparing. It had to have examples of everything that we had done in the entire program, and it was an odd size. Now, are any of those things appropriate today?
Well, what I would tell you is most of the time when we see portfolios today, first, anything is appropriate as long as it's reflective of you. But what we see most often today is we see either digital portfolios or we see hard copy portfolios. I've seen everything from index cards, sort of like index cards that people explain and lay out on a table and explain. I've seen bound copies of books. I've seen magazines as portfolios. It really is about what's unique and particular to you. I would encourage you, when you're coming into an interview, to always bring a hard copy as well as your digital copy. Sometimes when you come to an employer's office, you may not be able to connect, or there's something wrong with the Wi-Fi. And if you can't pull up your portfolio, then there's a lot of angst on your part and a lot of kind of time spent trying to work through that process. So I would just encourage you to bring both forms, both copies of whatever medium you have.
Loved what you said about showing process, because that, as you're flipping through, you can see a pretty picture, but if there's something there that helps you understand what led to that pretty picture, that helps a great deal and demonstrates the thinking skills that the firm is looking for.
Absolutely.
I've heard other hiring managers also recommend things like a format that is printable, so that if you are sending somebody a PDF, that it be printable, because they might print it out and take it home at the end of the day. And I've also heard them say you've got about 3 seconds to make an impression with your resume and a page of your portfolio. So really focus on your best work.
That's right.
All right. Our next question is from Nessa. How do you find a mentor outside of the firm you are working in if you're looking for more honest feedback and advice?
I would say network. It's always about building your networks. Go to AIA events, get involved with the Associate AIA program. There are lots of opportunities for people in the architecture industry who are right out of school. I think you really have to start understanding who's out there and who's in the network. Do your research. Look and see who's publishing. If there's someone that you're really interested, who's published a great article that really intrigues you, get out there and meet them, talk to them. It's never too early to start building your network.
I'll add, coming back to the idea of the mentorship piece, I have a story that I like to tell about a friend of mine who worked with me at a firm, and we did big multifamily housing, and he had and he got a nice enough paycheck from us, but he also built a relationship with a boutique designer here in DC. And so his mentor, someone who couldn't hire him and probably wouldn't pay him well if he could hire him, but he got this great mentorship experience with a really brilliant, renowned designer because he was willing to ask.
That's right. And I'll just add to that and say, what you find with architects and designers, a lot of people want to share, they want to give back. So never be afraid to ask. They can only say no, but I think for the most part, you'll find that people are really going to be, they want to give back to you because someone gave back to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Our next question is from Carly. What are some specific interview no-nos, either specific to architecture or just in general?
That's a good question. Interview no-nos. I would say never come to an interview unprepared in terms of not having done your research. And when I say do your research, I also mean do a little bit more in-depth research. So don't ask questions that are just easy to find on your website. Ask questions that are a little more thoughtful. Do research on LinkedIn. Find out about the people that you're interviewing with. So always come prepared, and always dress for the interview. So I think in a design firm you can be a little more edgy, but always come in a way that is presentable and that you feel comfortable in that respect.
All right. Catherine would like to know, how do you balance personal ethics within the architecture field? For example, if you feel strongly on a topic, but the project you're asked to work on goes against your values.
I'll start.
I'll be pondering. You start.
Sure. That's a really good question. And I do think that it's really important that if there is a project that you're being asked to work on, that you speak up if it goes against kind of what you think and what you believe. At Perkins Law, there are projects that come up that maybe people don't think are the right projects for them. It is about personal choice in some respects, so you just have to talk to the people that you're working with and make your beliefs and your goals known.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to the things that might or might not be implied in that question, and that is, it unethical in a larger sense, that it's unethical within the profession or within compliance with laws, and that's one case where I think you have to make the ethical call to walk away and to sort of say, this is in violation of something. We shouldn't be doing this, and it may, you might find yourself in a position where you need to walk away, literally. But if it's something that's more of a personal ethic, say for example sustainability or something about the client and the client's business, what the kind of work they're doing. I heard somebody talking a lot about the huge the huge number of buildings that are being built for cannabis production. That's a big deal right now in the architecture world in some parts of the country. So those more personal ethics is something where you'd want to talk to your manager, and hopefully they can help you find a way around it, find another project you can work on. But if you're, and that may be a case where you choose to walk away if that's the only kind of project they're doing.
Sure. And I would piggyback on that and just say that, do your research before you start working for a firm. Make sure that their overall goals and values are actually representative of your personal goals and values as well. So there may be a project that comes up, as you were mentioning, and I was talking more about personal ethics in my first response, but if you are being asked to do something, just make sure that you're talking to people. And for the most part, I think most firms are not going to ask you to work on a project that completely is against your personal beliefs.
Right.
Okay, on a slightly lighter topic, Gogo asks, how likely is it that you would hire someone capable of doing the job but who doesn't have a referral?
You mean, assuming that you mean a referral from another employee or from within the industry, I think it's all about the individual, and it's always about what you bring to the table in terms of your skill sets and your knowledge and the best fit for the role. So we're always looking for talent, and we're going to hire the best talent, whether or not they have a referral or have previous work experience.
I think you would. I'm going to read into the question and assume that it's a professional referral, but you could also hopefully have someone who's able to vouch for your character, which would be welcome.
Okay. Andalman asks, what's the best way to beat around the bush and not say something negative when an interviewer asks you why you want to leave your current job?
That's a really good question. You all are throwing us some great.
Do you feel like you're being interviewed today?
I do. I think you can always talk about growth opportunity. So for the most part, I think when people are interviewing for a position, a lot of times it's about growth. What I would advise is you never really want to say anything negative about the current employer you're working for. And if you are so unhappy and that comes across in the interview, it doesn't fare well on the employer who's interviewing you. So always look at the positives and talk about what you've gained from that experience, but maybe there's a new growth opportunity for you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. You just say, well, I've been doing this kind of work and I'd like to do something different, or there's any number of things like that you could come up with that are reasons that you want to change, that's positive and that isn't because I'm miserable there.
Right.
Okay. Dahlia asks, would you recommend bringing something other than a portfolio to an interview? And I assume that's in addition to your portfolio.
I would always recommend bringing extra copies of your resume. It never hurts to have those ready, your cover letter. If you have anything else that you think is representative of you, one piece that I didn't mention in your portfolio that we always look for at Perkins & Will, and that's if you have any personal talents in terms of watercolors or drawing, sketching skills. I encourage people to include those in your portfolio. If they're not in your portfolio, bring them with you. We love to see that because it shows a creative side of you that we may not gather from renderings or from some of the process information that's in your portfolio already.
Yeah, and I've heard others talk about the value of bringing perhaps maybe not if you have a little bit more experience and you've worked on a good set of construction drawings and you have a half-size set of those available to you, then you might be able to bring that and talk through the pieces of the work that are yours.
That's a really good point.
Okay. Next is a question from Alvin. After, say, 5 to 10 years of experience and career progress, what would you say is more important, your resume, your portfolio, or references?
How far is he? How many years?
6 specifically.
Okay.
I updated it to 5 to 10.
Okay, 5 to 10.
So, what I they're all important. But I do think it's really, 5 to 10 years of experience. It's about the experience that you've had working within the profession at that point. So, if you've worked for a competitor or if you have experience on a particular project type, it really also depends on the position that you're applying for. So if you have a lot of experience working on one project type and you're interested in doing something totally different or working on a new project, then it's really helpful for you to be able to explain in your resume kind of why you want to pursue a new project type.
I would say, what tells your story? What is the story you want to tell, and what best tells that story? You might have a lot of portfolio pieces on a project type you don't want to work on. So what is the piece in your portfolio or your resume or your experience or your extracurricular activities that tells that story? And then what are the graphic representations that help support that?
Okay. Our next question is from Jason. How do you approach the conversation about salary and position within the firm after you complete the exam and get licensed?
I think it's always important to approach that conversation first with your manager, sharing with them your goals, your aspirations. It should be an open dialogue. So you can also always talk with HR, with the management team in your office, but excuse me. But I do think it's important to have the conversation, to bring it up, to talk about why you feel like you need a compensation adjustment at that time. And you may or may not know where other people are in relation to that. At Perkins Well, we give like a licensure bonus. So we have some kind of things in place already to help after that process, and we pay for all the exams as you pass all the exams. But we do, you should be encouraged, and you should have that. You should feel free to broach that conversation in an impactful way.
I would hope you also have found that out ahead of time, right? What the existing standard is, because it's a lot easier to say, now I'm taking my exams. Does that result in a bonus? So if the company hasn't made that clear to you what their policies are regarding paying for exams or what that does to impact your salary, it's easier to ask that, I think, ahead of time rather than, okay, I've passed the exam, now what?
Right. I think you should also always be able to demonstrate what your worth is. You should always be able to talk about where you think you are, understanding what those surveys and things are out in the market, understanding your worth, as we talked about before, and then also understanding, what the other limitations might be from the employer perspective in terms of when compensation adjustments are made, but asking those questions and making sure that you feel comfortable with the answers ahead of time.
You mentioned when we talked about before, I think that was on our false start. So in case I haven't said it yet, you should, and apologies for our little delay at the beginning, but if you're looking for, what is my worth, the AIA compensation survey, there's an online tool that you can use to sort of gauge that based on the descriptions that are given there. And you should always compare that description very carefully to what you're actually doing in the firm. But that can give you an idea of what that position in your market is valued at and what other people are being paid.
Okay. Our next question is from Sam. How do you show initiative and take more responsibility in the office without undermining your manager or coworkers?
So, good question, again. Taking initiative, that's really about, stepping up. I don't think it's ever seen as undermining your coworkers. I think it's always appreciated when people are stepping up to the plate and taking on some ownership of different projects or things that you think might be necessary in the office or might enhance the culture of the office. I know at Perkins & Will we're always appreciative of people who are taking on new things, seeing a need, and then saying, you know what, here's my idea. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure we've got the budget for it, and then let's do it. So I think it's always a good thing to step up, to take initiative, and do it in a way that you're gaining insights from other people, you're collaborating, you're having discussions, and you're engaging the right people to help make those decisions and move things forward.
Yeah, a professional career, you're no longer in a cohort. You're no longer in a class that all moves at the same rate and all has the same things that you're doing in your life, and your priorities are different. So, step in and do the things that you're interested in and create the path that you want within the firm.
Okay. Marina asks, I'm currently an IPAL student at Catholic University of America. Would it be useful to my career to try to work in Canada or Mexico and gain international experience?
Sorry, I can take this, but can you read it again?
Sure. I am currently an IPAL student at the Catholic University of America. Would it be useful to my career to try and work in Canada or Mexico to get international experience? And I think she specifically wants to know before she completes her IPAL program.
Right. So the international experience, I would just, hopefully the rules about experience settings and what hours you can count in AXP. So aside from that, making sure that you're able to count those international setting O hours working under a licensed professional in the other country, or if there happens to be a U.S. licensed architect in that other country, that's great for your AXP hours. So aside from that, I think any opportunity to travel abroad, to work abroad, actually increases your experience, and I would say looks good on a resume, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. So, I think the most experience you can gain, especially coming right out of school, anything that sets you apart from your competition is always a good thing.
Okay. Our next question is from Eddie, who's trying to broaden their range in learning and decision making. He says, well, I've been interning in different sections of architecture, for example, residential and commercial. What other ways can he get his feet wet?
I could spend all night talking about this and coming and brainstorming with you. It would be a lot of fun. But I think I would look at, so assuming you're going to stay at your current job because you like it and they like you, I think you would look to select some mentors outside, some people you can go meet. I think you could go to AIA conferences or other conferences, broaden to, and in fact, perhaps look at some of the other parallel organizations. Look at CSI, Construction Specifications Institute. Look at the Urban Lands Institute. Look at the Congress for New Urbanism. There are all sorts of places where you can meet people that are outside your current circle and learn about what they're doing. And I think that would give you some great exposure.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I agree with that. I also think it's a great idea to set up interviews with those people. If you see someone who is doing something that you're really interested in, or you're curious about how they got down to the path that they are taking now and where they are in their profession, then ask the questions. People are usually more than willing to share their experiences if you ask the questions. So set up those interviews and talk with them.
Okay. And a reminder to our viewers, you can submit your questions at any time using the chat tool on your screen, so keep them coming. Our next question is from Frank. Does a master's degree make one earn more dramatically? And is it worth it to invest $150,000 to go to grad school? And as a follow-up, do you have any suggestions about recovering from that debt?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to have an opinion on that.
So I think overall for most of the firms around town, what we want is for you to become a licensed architect. Whether it's a 5-year program or a master's program, what we want, because it means more for us as a firm to say we've got a certain number of registered architects, it means a different thing to your clients when you start to serve those clients in different roles as you progress through your career. So it really is up to you. You need to make a personal choice about which program is right for you, whether it's that 5-year program or if it's that master's program. So that's what I would say is probably most important.
And I guess the other things that I would bring to it is obviously you want a program that leads you to a professional license and one that is broadly accepted if you're going to work in more than one state. So we would want it to be a NAB accredited professional degree, whether that's a bachelor's of architecture or a master's of architecture is up to you. The other piece is, what is the focus of that master's program? Is it something that's sort of particular? Does it have a particular network of alumni that it's important to be connected to? I think those things are what, more than just the length of the degree and the cost of the degree. I think you have to look at really do your sort of cost benefit analysis of, all right, what does this degree get me that's different, and is that worth it? And as for helping you pay off your debt, I don't know that we're going to have any brilliant answers on that.
Okay. Our next question is from Melissa. How would one ask for a raise that stresses your seniority in the company without comparing yourself to your other coworkers?
Well, I'll go back to something I said earlier, and I do think it's always about talking about your worth and your contributions. So when you go in to have that conversation about compensation, make sure that you understand what questions you want to ask, why you feel you need a compensation adjustment. And then I think what employers are going to do is they're going to take a look at what they do consider to be, your peer group within the office, within the firm, their pay equity things that you need to keep in mind when we are reviewing those things. But it is about talking about your value, your worth, and the contributions you've made to the organization to date.
I think preparing you for those, I mentioned earlier, the AIA compensation survey tool, and there are other tools, salary.com, although their numbers I think are a tiny bit inflated compared to the AIA. But most of those have elaborate job descriptions, and you're sort of reading through those and having an eye, being sort of giving yourself a self-test. All right, do I do these things? Do I have these skills that merit this level of pay? Just being prepared and knowing what you're talking about.
Okay. Ashley asks, in this day and age, is it worth staying with one firm for a long period of time, or is it better to get a variety of experience with different firms?
I think that's a personal choice. We've got people who've been with Perkins & Will their entire career, or people that have recently started and have experiences elsewhere. I always think it's a great idea to work on a lot of different project types before you specialize on one project type. We try to allow those opportunities at Perkins & Will. The Atlanta studio in particular of Perkins & Will has all of the different project types and practices and disciplines that Perkins & Will offers. So we hope you get that experience within one firm, especially if you start with us at the beginning of your career. But it's always a personal decision. It really depends on what types of projects. And, to take a step back and look and make sure that you're working for a firm that shares your values, that continues to appreciate you, and that is allowing you the opportunity for growth.
I think there is, getting diverse experiences is good, and there are a variety of ways to do that. You can do it by going to different firms, and you can do it by, as I mentioned earlier, going to conferences, finding ways to sort of give yourself an externship, to go out and to be exposed to other things. But the one thing you have to be careful of if you are going to be jumping from firm to firm is that if you do that too much, that starts to look bad on your resume. And people who are in hiring positions are saying, okay, why did they keep leaving? And they might think that it's something other than, I just want a different experience. And they're going to question, will you stay here long enough to finish a project? So just be a little bit cautious about that.
Right. And now just to tag onto that, I would encourage you all to make sure you know your story when you're going into the process of reviewing your resumes, because employers will ask. And as Jeremy was just saying, short stints on your resume do raise a bit of an HR red flag. But if there's a good reason for why you left an organization, then that has a different story. Or perhaps it's relocation. Just make sure that you know your story going into it.
Mm-hmm. I would encourage someone who's just starting out to try and find a way to have an experience in a small firm and a big firm. I think that's an important exposure to get.
I'll agree with that.
Okay. Related to the topic of getting a variety of experience, if a candidate's having trouble earning hours in a few AXP areas because their supervisor can't or won't assign them new tasks, do you have any advice on getting those hours that they need?
Yes. I think, obviously the first line of defense is you want to have that conversation with your supervisor, and assuming that you've already done that, I think, in this question, then if it's a big enough organization, you can take that to the next level and go to their supervisor and say, I really need to get this exposure, or to a principal or to an HR department person. If you're in an organization that has a human resources department, they will be able to help guide you through who you should talk to, and they will probably make sure that it happens. If none of that works and you're not getting the exposure, your supervisor is actually violating the AIA Code of Ethics, and they're violating the agreement that they sort of sign on to when they become an AXP supervisor. Now, going and telling them that they're violating these agreements probably isn't going to work, so you should probably find a way to move on.
anything to
Yeah, I
add?
don't really have anything to add except that always making sure your goals and your aspirations are known, and as you said, raising it to the next level if you're in a firm that is large enough to have HR and operations, because I do think you need to take ownership of your career. And what we always tell people is we don't see all your AXP hours all the time, and so you need to raise your hand and say, you know what, I need to get some CA experience or whatever the experience is that you need. So make sure you're taking ownership of it.
Yeah, definitely be proactive and say, this is what I need. Look at the task areas that you need exposure to and make sure that you're communicating that clearly. But with this question, we sort of presumed that that was happening and they still weren't getting them. So,
All right. Well, do you have any advice on advocating for better equity and inclusion at your firm?
So I'll take that one. And Perkinsville has a diversity, inclusion, and engagement initiative. And it really started out as an opportunity for us as a firm just to do better. It started out of a few people saying, hey, we need to think about things differently. And in order to advocate for equity, inclusion, diversity at your firm, it's about taking those small steps and how are you making the small impacts on your community, whether it's doing a program for underprivileged youth to expose them to the architecture industry, to having conversations about pay equity in your firm. I think just making those small steps, taking those small steps and doing what you can do to make an impact and engaging the right conversations with the right people to share your interest and your desires for moving that forward.
I think you can also, there are now some really great resources available to help facilitate the conversation and to help encourage you. The AIA now has their guides to equitable practice, as well as the Code of Ethics, and those are great resources for you to familiarize yourself with, and know the kind of language that's used and the kind of conversations that you can have. Those resources will make you an expert and a very helpful person in facilitating those conversations.
Okay. Ade asks, and I'm tweaking this question just a little for the purpose of a wider audience. As an international licensed architect that's practiced for 10 years who just became eligible for an architect path for NCARB, do you have any suggestions on finding a firm that will support international individuals or foreign applicants who are working to complete the AXP in the United States?
Okay.
You take that.
Okay, I can take that. I think that the biggest challenge right now, and I don't know if this is implied in your question or not, one of the biggest challenges is visas, right? Whether or not you have a visa that allows you to work, or if you require an employer that will sponsor a visa for you. I've known lots of architecture firms in the past who have been more than happy to support H-1B visas for people. Right at the moment, the latest information that I've heard is that it's become dramatically more difficult to get H-1B visas. And so that's the unfortunate reality we live in. But assuming that you have a visa or have access to a visa or can get one through your firm, my experience has been that the architectural community is actually very receptive to foreign educated architects and foreign licensed architects.
And I'll agree with that. I mean, it really is just dependent upon your personal situation in terms of your eligibility to work in the U.S. I also encourage people just to understand what that process is. I think I've been approached by many international applicants who may or may not really understand the process in the U.S. of obtaining those visas, those work visas. So I think it behooves you to really understand, to know what your options are, and then we can certainly have a conversation about if it makes sense for you to be able to work in the U.S.
Right, and one thing I do want to mention, because this I've been told that this sometimes happens with particularly with international students, is maybe the culture or country that they're coming from, it's still common for there to be unpaid internships, and that is not an accepted practice in the United States. So if you or your friends are having unpaid internships as an international student, don't do that. If you're working and delivering value to your employer that they're billing for, you should be paid.
Okay. Ralphie asks, how do you know if you're being subjected to unequal pay, and how can you ask for better salary transparency?
That's a really good question, again. So I think you have to have the conversations. And again, I can only speak really from my experience, but at Perkins & Will, I was in partnership with our Chief HR Officer, Chief Talent Officer, and external consultant. We actually went through a pay equity exercise, which was really great. We identified pay-related factors. We had lots of conversations around the country with all the managing directors and operations directors, so we really tried to elevate the concept of pay equity and making sure that we are providing equal pay for equal work. So, I think you have to start the conversation, understand what your firm's values are, understand where your firm's take is on pay equity, and if you have an HR department, broach the question, talk with the people who might have insight into that particular topic to begin the conversation.
Okay. Jason asks, is there an advantage if you have someone who has an architectural license as well as a PE? And I'm assuming PE is professional engineer.
What I would say to that is it always helps if you have a wide variety of experiences. So we do look for people who have dual degrees. Engineering and architecture is not ones that we typically commonly see at Perkins & Will together necessarily, because we don't have engineering in-house. However, we do see a lot of architects in landscape architecture degrees, or architecture and interior design degrees, or architecture and urban design degrees, or a combination thereof. So I think the more well-rounded your educational experience is, the better it will make you in terms of specifically working for a firm with an integrated practice like Perkins & Will and some of the other larger firms.
I think it's an interesting question, and the real question is, are you looking for increased value of your paycheck or just the increased opportunities that it opens you to? I think, are you going to, because you have 2 degrees and 2 professional licenses, are you going to get twice the salary? Probably not. But it opens you to a world of being a better architect or being a better engineer and knowing how to better communicate across those disciplines. It opens you to more career possibilities in the future. It makes you very portable, but whether or not that's really worth the cost of the 2 degrees and the 2 licenses is a whole different question.
Okay.
And I know people that have done it, by the way.
Our next question is from Dahlia, who had their first internship this past summer. Should I stick with this firm next summer as I was invited back, or should I look for a new opportunity?
I'll go back to saying I think that's a personal decision. I do think during the internship process, it's a great idea, specifically, as Jeremy was just saying, to get an experience at a large firm or a small firm. So it's never a bad idea to expand your internship experiences. But if you had a really great experience, you think you can have a different or a new opportunity with the same firm, and you really enjoy the relationships that you've started to build, it's a great idea to go back if that's really the right fit for you.
Okay. Dominic asks, what's the typical salary range for an architectural graduate with 2 years of experience? I suspect the answer is it varies.
That would be the right answer.
So the best way to get to your answer to that question is to go to that aforementioned AIA salary survey website and click the corresponding category for architect with that much experience. I think it's called Architect 1 still, but you're Architect 1 or 2, and put in I think it lets you also put in the location you're in and find out.
There are definitely cost of living differences, so make sure that you understand the market that you're looking at.
Significant, yeah.
Okay. I think we have time for a few more questions. So if you have any last-minute questions, just keep them in the chat box. And so our next question is, my supervisor takes a few months to review my AXP reports. What should I do?
So again, this is one of those where there is an ethical consideration. The AIA Code of Ethics actually speaks to this, that supervisors should be responding in a timely manner to candidates they're supporting. So that's the very high-minded answer. So the practical side of that is you should ask them to see if they can do it more quickly. And back to the same path that I said earlier, if they're not amenable to that, then you might have to start talking to HR or to someone else.
Okay. Our next question is, my firm doesn't help pay for ARE divisions or other licensure costs. How can I ask for some of those benefits?
I think you can ask the question, but I really think you should know going into to working for an organization. I think for the most part, most firms do offer to either, at least most of the larger firms now, offer to pay for the AREs once you pass all of them. Some firms give licensure bonuses. Some firms give you time off to study for and take exams. So I think you really ought to do your research before you start working for a firm and really understand what their philosophy is kind of before you sign the contract to begin working for them.
Okay. Our next question is from Deo. As a foreign educated and licensed architect with experience in different design, cultural, and material usage, how does this impact how a potential employer would view my portfolio and internship placement?
I'm sorry. So could you repeat that question?
Okay, so I think they are a foreign educated and licensed architect with experience in different cultures and materials. So how would that impact how an employer would view them as a candidate for a position, I think, is the question.
So I would just go back to saying it's about experience. So I think employers are looking for people who are well-rounded, who have diverse backgrounds. So I think you just need to make sure that you are explaining your desires and what you would like to work on and what your background is in a cover letter, if you're invited for an interview or a phone screen, to have that conversation with your employer about what you're looking for. So I think we're always looking for talent. At Perkins & Will, and again at any other firm that you're talking with, people are looking for talented individuals, diversity of thought, diversity of background, and making sure that you're having that right conversation during the interviewing process.
We deal with helping foreign architects get licensed in the United States and helping them find their path to licensure here. And so I know that there are a lot of differences from country to country. In some countries, the license is very similar to what we have in the United States. The education is very similar. Their license to practice is unlimited as it is here. And, so depending on the country you're coming from, that may vary. For architects licensed in the U.S., the expectation is that you're trained, even though you may not have worked in different climatic situations, you're trained to be able to research, understand, and respond to any climate in any building construction type. You may not have the experience, but you know how to dig into it and how to get the knowledge that you need. You know the questions to ask. So I think demonstrating that you have those traits will overcome any barrier otherwise.
Okay, so I think for our final question today, if you are currently testing and working toward getting licensed, would you recommend to stay at the same firm until you are licensed? Or is it a problem to relocate and work at another firm?
I would say that really, again, and I hate to keep saying it's a personal decision, but it really is. It is up to you what you can handle in terms of workload as you're trying to take those tests. We know that those are really tough exams. So is it the right time for you personally to make a shift? Starting a new job it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to learn the people and the practices and what you're supposed to be doing in a new role. But at the same time, if you're not getting the opportunities at the current firm you're working for, and you want to position yourself to be in a better place prior to finishing those licensure exams, then begin to look out elsewhere and seek new opportunities.
I think from a very practical standpoint, look at your rolling clock and how much slack time you have in there to make the transition, and where you might not be able to test because of those onboarding experiences. And the other thing is, if that relocation or change of jobs happens to involve relocation to a different state, you can still test in the new state and pursue the license in the state where you began the process. So from that standpoint, it shouldn't be a problem at all. And of course, we have test centers all over the world now. So.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time. So before we sign off, can you each share one key takeaway that you think our viewers should really learn today?
I'll start and I'll just say, always be curious, ask questions. If you're in the interviewing process, then make sure you are speaking up and you make your aspirations known. I jokingly tell all of my employees every year when we're talking about career path and development that my husband always tells me, he said, if you don't tell me what you want, I don't know what you want. So you have to make sure that you're articulating where you want to go with your career. So talk to people, ask questions, be curious, and never be afraid to start building your network at even an early age, because you never know who you're sitting across the table from now as a peer may one day be the CEO and you're calling on them for a new opportunity or a new project.
And I would say just encourage particularly people who are just out of school. You have, for much of your career, you've probably you've gone through a regimented process of some sort. You had to pick a school, and maybe you made some significant decisions and internships and things like that. But in a lot of ways, there's been a path that you've been on, and you have just fallen off the path. There's not even a path other than, once you start taking an exam, you've got to complete it in 5 years. Other than that, there's no path. So it's your turn to make your path, and I would encourage you to think actively about, all right, what now? What is next? Where do I want to be next? And what do I need to do to start going down that path? Who do I need to know? What experiences do I need to have? What events should I attend? And going with that, I would encourage you to seek out people who can guide you along that path. Architecture is not always easy. There will be times when you have something you don't understand from a technical standpoint, or you might find that you're very stressed and struggling to deal with something. Find the people that can help you. Find a mentor, find a career coach, or find a mental health professional that can really help you succeed and thrive and move to the next step in your career.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for being here with us today, and thank you, viewers, for sharing your questions. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and for more career tips, you can visit ncarb.org/blog, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.